So after you play pawn to e4 and black responds with pawn to c5, instead of going knight to f3, which is the common move here, I recommend that you play pawn to c4, known as the Staunton-Cochrane variation. So believe it or not, this one system takes all the Sicilian players out of theory, and most of the times this system transposes back into the English Botvinnik, which black players are not prepared for. So after c4, black may respond with knight to c6, and here you can either play knight g to e2, or you can play right away pawn to g3, and I'm going to explain why. So going back a few moves, I would like to mention that whatever black would do, we'll just make sure that our center is safe and black cannot do any funny tactics on the center. So that's where we are going to keep an eye on. So c4, knight c6 by black. Here I recommend that you play knight to e2, stopping black's knight from coming to the d4 square. Here you are going to see black playing knight to f6. Knight bc3 protects our pawn, and most of the times you're going to see black responding with a move pawn to e6. So the idea is that black wants to push his d pawn to the d5 square, and at all costs we should not allow pawn to d5 to happen. That's why we should play knight to f4, just keeping an eye on the d5 square. Black cannot play pawn to d5. And here I would like to mention something. Black cannot do anything. If black plays g5, we are going to go knight to h5, attacking his knight on f6. If black plays pawn to e5, we can go knight d5, sitting on that beautiful outpost. Bishop d6 by black would be like the most useless move of all times, as we are going to play pawn to d3, indirectly protecting our knight with our bishop. Same with queen to c7. It doesn't make sense because we are just going to push our pawn to d3, indirectly protecting our knight with our bishop on c1. For example, if black becomes stubborn and plays pawn to d5 anyways, we are going to capture that pawn with our c pawn, and if let's say e takes on d5, we are going to capture back with our knight which was sitting on f4. Black's knight cannot capture on e4 because we are going to pin the knight, and that's why the most sensible move for black to play here is knight takes on d5, after which we are going to play knight takes on d5 as well. And if let's say bishop e6 attacking our knight, here we are going to put our bishop on c4, just protecting our knight twice. Black may be tempted to play knight to f5, attacking our bishop on c4. The job is very simple. We just push pawn to d3, protecting our bishop. We do not mind to trade that bishop because black's knight on f5 is very active than our bishop, and we still have our outpost knight, and we are aiming to arrange our pawns in this manner. So if black takes, we are going to take with our pawn, and then if a bishop takes our knight, we are going to take with our c pawn. We'll have two center pawns. So clearly you can see that pawn to d5 fails due to this outcome. And again, instead of pawn to g5, black may also try to play pawn to s6, which is an engine move. Now this doesn't worry us. Let me just explain something here that you should always keep in mind. Whenever you see this pawn to s6, it's high time for you to play a4 because of the highlighted arrows. What black is planning to do here by playing pawn to s6 is preparing to put his rook on b8 and then push the b5 pawn. So that's why whenever you see pawn to s6, it's high time you play pawn to f4, just locking the queen side. Here you may see black responding with a move pawn to g6 and trying to fianchetto his bishop on g7. Here you should as well continue with the main plan, pawn to g3, also trying to fianchetto your bishop on g2, bishop g7, bishop g2, castle shot by black, castle pawn to d6. Look at how protected our center is. It's like black cannot do anything. This bishop on g2 is indirectly keeping an eye on the d5 square. It's hardly easy for black to do anything in this position, and that's why you are going to see them making these short moves that are meaningless. And here I recommend that after pawn to d6, push the pawn to d3. You know, this is our primary goal in this system. We want to have these triple pawns here: the pawn on c4, the pawn on d3, and the pawn on e4. Later on, you're also going to see us pushing f4. Now, don't worry about our knight on f4, it served its purpose already. Since we have our bishop on g2, we are going to bring back our knight to the e2 square. Where are we going to put our bishop, which is on c1? You're going to see in a few moments. Queen c7 may be played by black. Pawn to h3 is very important as it prevents black from playing knight g4 maybe in the future, or bishop to g4 in the near future. You are also creating a room for your king, because at some point this king on g1 will go to the h2 square in order to be safe. So after pawn to h3, black may respond with pawn to b6. As you can see, it's hardly easy for him to make sensible moves here. That's why you see oftentimes black making these short moves, because he doesn't know the right continuation. Bishop e3. The final destination for our dark squared bishop will either be f2 after our pawn goes to f4, or h6 to pin black's bishop on g7 to the rook on f8, supported by our queen, which will soon go to d2. So black here may play bishop b7. Another point to be taken seriously: bishop g7 equals rook a b1. So we bring back our knight to the e2 square. Rook a d8 may be played by black. f4. If at all you don't know what to do in the middle game, just think of how you can develop the f2 pawn to the f4 square so that you can push it forward, or maybe you can capture the pawn on e5. At this point, black may be tired and think pawn to d5 now makes sense, with an intention of forking our knight and our bishop. But we're going to take this pawn, and then if e takes d5, we just go pawn to e5, attacking black's knight on f6. And here black may try to do something like pawn to d4. We do not worry much about this move, because we are going to take that knight. If black takes pawn on f6, we go knight e4. After d takes on e3, knight takes on f6 check, king g7, knight d5. There is no way black can protect his pawn on e3, so black would have to go queen g6. And then after we take the pawn on e3 with our knight, we are better in this position, and black cannot do anything. So you can see that there is no much memorization in this system. The whole idea is just to protect our center, making sure that black does not penetrate, and we are good to go. To be more clear, let me show you our main plan. So our universal system goes like this: pawn to e4, pawn to c4, and then pawn to d3. So first of all, we want to strengthen our center and make sure that we have these triple pawns. The next phase goes like this: this knight on b1 goes to c3, and then this knight goes to e2. So you can see the knights are supposed to be arranged in this way. So this should be your primary goal on the center. And what are you supposed to do on the queen side? If a6 by black, for example, remember what I said? Black wants to put his rook on b8 and push the b5 pawn. So whenever you see s6, it's high time you play pawn to f4. So the idea is just to lock the queen side completely. And after locking the queen side, you now shift your attention to the king side. So what are you going to do on the king side? What you're going to do is as follows: you're going to fianchetto your bishop on g2 so that you can castle short. And again, remember what I said in this position: whenever you see black's bishop going to g7, it's high time you consider the move rook a to b1 so that you protect the b2 pawn indirectly. If you can play rook b1, play it as soon as possible whenever you see bishop to g7. And let's say maybe after pawn to d6, again pawn to d6 opens the way for the bishop to come to the g4 square. So whenever you see moves such as this, play h3. h3 stops black from playing knight to g4 in the future, or bishop to g4. If knight to f6, for example, again play bishop to e3. Just like I said earlier on, the final destination for this bishop which goes to e3 is f2 or h6, provided that our queen is already on d2. So let's say bishop d7 by black, just a random move. Here we play b3, just completing our queen side. And whenever you see this battery here, queen c8 and the bishop on d7, it's high time you put your king on h2, and our system is complete, believe it or not. So in the middle game, our plan is very simple. We are planning to go pawn to f4 and either push it to f5, or take the pawn which will be on e5 possibly, so that we can open the F file. But in most cases, I recommend that you just continue pushing this pawn up to the F5 square so that you can just disturb black's king side by capturing on G6.